Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Jeffrey Epstein Show. I'm your host, Bobbycapucci, and this is a morning update. In news that should not shock any of us at this point, Jeffrey Epstein's estate and Khan and Indike are being accused of allegedly belittling and trying to delay a lawsuit from one of Jeffrey Epstein's survivors. Now, this does not shock me, to be honest with you, in the least. Indike and Khan are both smarmy, scummy individuals, and I don't think either of them should have anything to do with the estate. In fact, they should be part of the investigation by the prosecutors. Indike's name, his signature, is littered all over paperwork throughout the years that Jeffrey Epstein had him sign for various projects. Now, Indike was basically Jeffrey Epstein's in-house lawyer. He was with him from the jump, was always around, was always there to answer questions, to give advice, etc., etc. And you see that as him being named as an executor. And the same goes for Khan. So these two guys have zero business, in my opinion, having anything to do with the estate. And I talked about this at length when we went over the Survivors Compensation Fund. And I was disgusted by the fact that these guys are the executors. I mean, there has to be some sort of apparatus or some sort of process to remove people from that kind of position. Because how can you put people who victimized these girls or at least enabled it, how can you put them in charge of the compensation? Or I guess they aren't in charge of the compensation, the people from the fund are, but they're in charge of the estate. So how could you put them in charge of the estate, knowing that at the very least Indike is up to his ears in this nonsense? So I thought it was gross from the beginning. I still think it's gross now. And I am optimistic, but I remain skeptical about the whole compensation process. And again, like I've stated several times here on the podcast, as long as the survivors are happy with what occurs, and that's what we're looking for here, right? At the end of the day, they're the ones who suffered this great trauma, and money's not going to fix that. But what it does is it another shot into the belly of the Epstein monster and the Epstein empire. He's not around to face justice, right? He's dead. So all that's left to these survivors is to be compensated monetarily. And the estate, when it comes to Indike and Khan especially, they're going to do everything that they can to make sure that the least amount of money goes out the door. Because that somehow, some way, they're going to try and enrich themselves off of this whole process. When in reality, they should be going broke fighting RICO charges right along Ghislaine Maxwell, in my opinion. But here we are. They're the executors. And in news that definitely does not shock me, and it should not shock you, one of the survivors is now attacking the estate over their behavior of how they treated her and her attempt to follow through on her lawsuit. So let's see what ABC News has to say about this situation. Headline: Jeffrey Epstein's estate's lawyers accused of belittling alleged survivor. Author: James Hill. A lawyer for an alleged child sex trafficking survivor contends in a new court filing that attorneys for Jeffrey Epstein's $655 million estate are engaged in a concerted and coordinated effort to delay the woman's lawsuit in an attempt to steer her claims into a private survivor compensation fund established by the estate. And that gives me pause right there. I find that concerning. Why are they trying to steer her into the compensation fund? If she wants to go through with the lawsuit, then that's her constitutional right. I don't like how the wording is here, right? I feel like that it's like they're trying to force her into the compensations fund. And that should be strictly on a voluntary basis. If one of these survivors decides that the compensation fund isn't for them, well, they should still have recourse to go through with a lawsuit and do what they think is not necessary and what is right without being belittled or attacked by the estate. And it's the same sort of tactic we see from Dershowitz, et cetera, et cetera. And it's the tactic they've used from the very jump when you're talking about the Jeffrey Epstein criminal enterprise. They have done everything they can to make these cases as difficult as possible for the survivors, so the survivors feel like they have no real choice but to submit to the fund and postpone the proceedings indefinitely. Robert Glassman, an attorney for the alleged survivor who sued under the pseudonym Jane Doe, wrote. And again, that's what they try and do because they have more money than most people, so they can afford long, drawn-out, stupid litigation processes where the rest of us, for the most part, like we talked about earlier, we don't have those kind of funds, right? Say you're in a legal fight with one of these people and you don't have a lawyer who steps up to the plate and is going to help out financially, maybe taking it pro bono or what have you, then you're really up against the 8 ball and you're going to be forced to have advice from a lawyer who is nowhere near as good as the lawyers that you're dealing with. Thankfully, what we have seen here in this case, we have seen a lot of high-profile lawyers step up and take up the mantle and defend these survivors, which is great. So, and then you have guys like Bradley Edwards, who was, I'm sure well-respected in his community before this case and well-respected for the job he does. But what he has been launched into at this point after his courageous and fantastic work in defense of these survivors against Jeffrey Epstein, well, those are the kind of lawyers that you have to fight this kind of battle. And if you don't have those kind of lawyers, people with big, long, deep pockets like Epstein's estate, they'll just sue you and sue you and sue you until it's not financially feasible for you to continue on. But thankfully, we're not seeing that in this case, and we're seeing some of these lawyers step up, and it looks like a lot of them are taking it personal. Doe filed the lawsuit against the estate in January. The complaint also names Ghislaine Maxwell, Epstein's accomplice, as a co-defendant. Doe alleges she was recruited by the pair in 1994 when she was a 13-year-old music student at a summer camp in Michigan. And now, remember, the charges that Maxwell is facing currently are from the years from 94 to 97, 1994 to 1997, which falls right into line with this Accusers statement and the timeline. So could this be one of the people who Maxwell allegedly abused and who the charges have been brought for? Quite possibly. Of the more than 30 women who brought legal claims against Epstein's estate following his death last year, Doe is the only accuser who has declined to put her lawsuit on hold to pursue an alternative resolution via the Epstein Survivors Compensation Fund, a voluntary, non-adversarial program that began evaluating claims in June. And I would hope that the people who are running the fund, Finkelstein and Company, I would hope that they're not being adversarial about things. I would hope that they're being mindful of the survivors and what they have went through and why we were all here in the first place. So I hope that that's the case, because we know the estate's not going to do that. We know that the estate is going to continue to be as scummy as they've always been. In the 7 months since Doe filed the lawsuit, estate lawyers have yet to turn over a single document in response to pretrial requests and have resorted to belittling Doe simply because she is exercising her constitutional right to pursue a legal claim against those responsible for causing her unimaginable harm, according to Glassman's claims in a letter to U.S. Magistrate Judge Deborah Freeman. And again, this is well within her rights. Look, You don't have to be part of that fund. You don't have to be part of that compensation fund, especially if you believe that you have you don't think you're going to get a fair shake, right? Or you believe that you have other avenues open to you where you feel like maybe more justice can occur. I don't know. I wouldn't even begin to try and put myself in Doe's shoes here and, figure out what's going through her head or what her strategy is. But either way, it is well within her rights to pursue this whichever way she chooses. And if the estate has something to say about it, well, they could pound sand. In short, since Doe has not agreed to stay her case and walk away, she is being punished by the Epstein estate for doing what she has a basic right to do. That is simply unacceptable, and she is not walking away, Glassman wrote. So it looks like Doe is taking off the gloves and getting ready for a street fight here, which is going to be pretty interesting going forward to see how this all breaks. I'm very interested to see how the court reacts to this as well. Glassman declined to comment on the letter when reached by ABC News. Lawyers for the estate did not respond to an email request for comment, but in a letter filed with the court late Wednesday, they disputed Glassman's allegations that the estate had belittled the alleged survivor as completely untrue. "We have done no such thing, and the inclusion of this claim by plaintiff's counsel further highlights their lack of good faith in these discussions," Epstein's estate attorney, Mary Grace Metcalf, wrote. So basically, we did no such thing. We didn't belittle her at all. But, since she's included this claim, it shows a lack of her good faith. So let's just low-key throw some shade then. I'm going to lean to the side of the estate probably belittled her, especially if we're talking about Indike and Khan and whatever law team those two knuckleheads have kicked into gear, because Darren Indike especially is really, really a key part of this whole entire thing. And while he's not directly implicated in abusing any of these girls, he was a very important component of what Jeffrey Epstein had going on. The parties have been wrangling for months now over the estate's insistence on a confidentiality order and a non-disclosure agreement being in place before they would turn over any relevant information in their possession to Doe's lawyers, who have thus far declined to sign on to its terms. During a teleconference last week, estate lawyer Bennett Moskowitz told the court that Doe's lawyers' refusal to sign the agreement is the only thing standing in the way of the estate turning over documents to her legal team. Well, hold on a minute. I don't understand. If she's not willing to pursue that avenue and go down the compensation road, then I think it's a moot point. I think they should turn over whatever documents are requested and whatever documents are required by the judge. And I think that they should get this process moving. If she does not want to be involved in this victim's compensation fund, then that's her business. Why are they trying to force her into that? It kind of boggles our minds because this case is brought by someone acting through an anonymous name. That is reason alone to have a confidentiality agreement, Moskowitz said. And okay, well, that's fine from your opinion, but who knows what her strategy is? And again, it's not up to you to formulate her strategy, Mr. Moskowitz. It's up to her, her family, and her legal team. Moskowitz also advocated for putting the litigation on hold while Doe submits a claim to the compensation fund, arguing that it was a very sensible thing to do. According to a spokesperson for the compensation program, forms were sent to over 100 potential claimants so far, and more than 25 claims have been filed and are being reviewed. And that's a nice little tidbit, right? We haven't had too many updates about the compensation fund lately since our last talk about it, and it's nice to see that there's a little progress there at least. 25 claims have been filed, and they're being reviewed. But that also means that there are 75 claims that have not been filed. I wonder what's going on there. Perhaps there's a bit of a reluctance on the part of some of these survivors after looking at the fine print. Again, I'm not sure. I'm certainly not privy to any of that information. But, it's it's something to think about as we wonder what's going on here when it comes to the compensation fund. Unlike a lawsuit, the claims process is designed to be confidential from start to finish, which may be a favored path for the vast majority of alleged Epstein survivors. But the process, by its very nature, may also prevent disclosure of information about the scope of Epstein's finances and his alleged sex trafficking operation that might otherwise be revealed in public court records or proceedings. The only public reporting required of the program is a periodic aggregate accounting of the number of claims paid and the total amount of the awards. And right there, folks, you can see why the estate is so adamant about having her be part of this claims process. They don't want any of this shit aired out. They want to keep this stuff as private as possible so that the other co-conspirators and the others who had taken part in Jeffrey Epstein's criminal enterprise can try and save a little bit of face. So that's why they're so gung-ho about the compensation program. If it goes to court, obviously, well, you have discovery phase and it's public record, et cetera, et cetera. So they're going to try and avoid that at all costs. Judge Freeman, who is overseeing the case, seemed to be nudging Doe's lawyers during the telephonic hearing in the direction of staying the case, as dozens of other Epstein accusers had done. I don't like to hear that. The judge should be there impartially and ready to rule either way when either the prosecution or the defense comes up with whatever plan they have coming up that they came up with. But I don't think the judge trying to finesse the Jane Doe here is a good look. I'm not trying to twist anybody's arms here. I just think you need to talk, because I don't want to see money unnecessarily spent, Freeman said. And I'm not saying you should agree to a stay, but I think you should consider it. Oh, you're not trying to twist anyone's arm, huh, Judge Freeman? I'm not saying that you should agree to a stay, but I think you should consider it. No, you're basically saying that you think they should agree to it. They should consider it? What makes you think that they haven't considered it already? And why is that language even necessary on the record? But Glassman told ABC News in a brief interview last month that while Doe may at some point opt to submit a claim to the compensation fund, she has no interest in delaying the lawsuit while the process runs its course. Glassman also said he sees no need for the confidentiality agreement the estate wants in place because there is an existing court order which prohibits the disclosure of his client's identity to anyone not involved in the case. And Glassman here seems like he has his ducks in a row, huh, folks? Seems like he knows exactly what he's doing, he's pushing the right buttons, and he has a playbook that he's playing out of. So it looks like Glassman certainly knows what he wants, and he's going hard in an attempt to get that. We're interested in taking this case to trial and getting the evidence that we need in order to prepare the case for that time, Glassman said. Doe's lawsuit alleges that she is the first known child survivor of Epstein and Maxwell. According to her civil complaint, after first meeting them at the music camp, a months-long grooming process continued after she returned home to Florida, where Epstein had a seaside estate on Palm Beach Island. Doe's father had recently passed away, the complaint said, creating an opportunity for Epstein and Maxwell to fill the void. And you know how they do that. That was one of their favorite moves, right? How many of these girls have we heard from that came from broken homes or unfortunate circumstances, where Epstein and the other sick, disgusting child abusers that he had working with him would exploit that and use it as part of the grooming process. Epstein gave himself the name of Doe's godfather, while Maxwell acted like an older sister to her, her complaint said. They took her to the movies, went shopping with her, and lounged around Epstein's estate with her. Doe, now 40, alleges the abuse escalated over the next few years as Epstein and Maxwell asserted more and more control over her life and aspirations. Epstein paid for voice lessons, private high school tuition, and even co-signed a lease on a New York City apartment for Doe and her mother, according to her complaint. She claims the abuse occurred at Epstein's homes in Florida, New York, and his ranch in New Mexico, and that she would often travel to those locations with Epstein and Maxwell on one of Epstein's private jets. And this is very interesting, the verbiage here and the story, because we know that the time frame where Maxwell is charged is 94 and 97, like I said earlier, and we see the timelines here are matching up. So she was trafficked to multiple states, so that's over state lines, right? Right away, that's the Mann Act. And you know what's coming next, right? Of course you do. It's also RICO. So when are we going to see those RICO charges? Epstein's system of abuse was facilitated in large part by his co-conspirator and accomplice Maxwell, who helped supply him with a steady stream of young and vulnerable girls, the complaint said, many of whom were fatherless like Jane Doe and came from struggling families. And now this was all before the Core 4 showed up, right? When Epstein had so much success with Maxwell as a groomer and procurer and partner, he figured, hell, I need to get me some more girls to work in that same capacity. So Ghislaine has herself an army to control, some lieutenants to send out. And then we see how everything came into place for him, how the whole entire enterprise was built. The allegations in Doe's complaint are substantially similar to the circumstances of one of the 3 child survivors described in the criminal indictment filed against Maxwell last month. Maxwell has denied Doe's claims in the civil suit and has pleaded not guilty to the charges in the criminal indictment. She is currently being held without bail in a federal jail in Brooklyn, New York. In a letter to the court Wednesday, Maxwell's attorney, Laura Menninger, indicated that she intends to ask the court to put Doe's claims against Maxwell on hold, pending the outcome of her criminal case. Citing the difficulties she's had communicating with Maxwell at the jail, Menninger asked for another week to consult with her client before filing a formal request. More dragging of the feet. More muddying of the waters. One good thing, folks, is that kind of stuff, at the very least, seems to be over in Judge Preska's courtroom. It's unfortunate that Judge Freeman seems to still be playing their game. From where I'm sitting, though, it is high time that Indike and Khan are removed as executors of this estate and put firmly into the investigation of Jeffrey Epstein's criminal enterprise for the role that the both of them obviously played. If you'd like to contact me, you can do that at bobbycapucci@protonmail.com. That's BOBBYCAPUCCI@protonmail.com. You can also find me on Twitter at BOBBY_CAPUCCI. The link that goes along with this episode is in the description box. All right, folks, we'll be back later on. We'll rock and roll a little bit more.